what I want to talk about a little bit today is a certain kind of sadness or grief that we have. It's very common. Um, Clinically, it's called anticipatory grief. I call it navigating future loss because it's really something that happens to us at all kinds of different times in our lives. And it can certainly happen in terms of living with ALS. I think we can think about it as a kind of grief which can occur from diagnosis forward, or maybe even beforehand. The more I talk with all of you folks who are living with ALS, the better I understand that sometimes even getting to a point of diagnosis is quite a challenge, and that there can be a lot of feelings and things that happen in our lives even before we get to diagnosis. But what I would say about anticipatory grief is that it's a type of grief that we often would be feeling when we're moving from one phase of a situation into another. So in terms of ALS, we might be moving from one phase of ALS to another where the symptoms are different as we move along. So the second slide I have is just kind of going over what I just said. There are lots of situations where we might feel this that aren't disease related and might not be related to physical illness at all. We can feel anticipatory grief at different times of our lives. And an example might be of somebody who's graduating from college. One person might be very excited and eager, looking forward to being out in the wide world after school is over. Another person might feel very sad at the same point in time, leaving school behind. They may feel a lot of anxiety about moving into a different phase of their life. But these feelings, no matter how differently two people may experience them, are normal reactions to change over which we have no control. So I think that's the key here, change over which we have no control. And when we think about the emotions of grieving future loss, there's a lot of things and elements and emotions that have to do with this type of grief. There could be guilt, there could be anxiety, anger, dread, depression, fear, all of those really harsh feelings that can be difficult to experience and also very difficult to support somebody else with when they are experiencing them and you aren't, because we're not always in the same place at the same time. The feelings that I note here are not sequential, and we could feel some or all of them in rapid succession, or we might not feel many of them at all, depending on our reaction to change over which we have no control. So there are lots of different circumstances, as I mentioned, that could trigger anticipatory grieving. Diagnosis of disease, certainly one. An impending divorce could be another one. Some people might feel very relieved they're going through a divorce process. Another person might feel a lot of dread, and they may be experiencing all those emotions before that divorce is even finalized. Some people feel very happy about retirement when they're finally retiring from their work life. They approach it with feelings of happiness and positivity. Other people might approach retirement with feelings of anxiety and feeling sad. So again, all of the situations that I've mentioned here are situations that have financial implications, and they may inspire feelings of guilt about how others will perceive or treat us during or after such a loss occurs. So I think that the thing is, we all have circumstances where we're coping with future loss. And the main point I want to make here is that it's important to receive support and reassurance that however we're feeling about a change coming up in our lives, we have support and that we know and believe that our emotions are normal. People often turn to trusted family members and friends. They may have a therapist or a counselor they're working with, or a support group they attend. Groups like this support group where people can talk about what's going on and they know it's a safe place and there are no feelings of embarrassment or that you're in the wrong for how you're feeling. The main thing about anticipatory grief, I think, is having that network of support, because you probably, like me, need more than one person or one resource that you can rely on when you're having these kinds of feelings. And although it may not be clear at times when we're going through these feelings, what we're really striving for when we're experiencing anticipatory grief is we're striving to maintain hope and we're preparing for future loss. So I think that those are the things that I really wanted to talk about in terms of emotions of future loss. The process of gaining acceptance in our circumstances includes learning to live in the present and being willing to move forward with memories you will never lose. So it's a lot, and we need support as we go along with it. There are some benefits that doctors and studies have shown with anticipatory grief. Benefits of grieving future loss or anticipatory grief for some people may help to sort out feelings and prepare to move forward. So some studies that have been done show that people who are experiencing intense anticipatory grief allows them to process their fears, and they move through them and they don't avoid them. And it will also create opportunities to deal with unfinished business between people, resolve old misunderstandings, and create opportunities for closure between people. Those are some of the things that can be possible benefits. There are other studies that have been done that show that there are possible drawbacks of anticipatory grief. So some doctors think that for some people, anticipatory grief may serve as a prelude to grief following loss, neither bolstering the person for the harsh reality of their loss or preparing them for the life ahead. Some studies even indicate that people who have anticipatory grief quite intensely for longer than 6 to 8 months may actually be at an intense risk for what they call prolonged grief disorder. And I'm not going to get too much into what prolonged grief disorder is, because there's a lot of different opinions about what prolonged might be. I prefer to call it complicated grief. And I think that's a less pejorative understanding of what extended periods of grief can be. It's not so much that it's prolonged as it is just complicated by other factors. So experiencing grief during long-term illness is normal. We need support in managing our feelings and developing the strength and resilience to move forward with our lives, even as we may be grieving. Anticipatory grief can have potential benefits. It may help us finally gain acceptance, and it may have no impact at all on grieving following the loss. How we experience grief is a personal experience, and there is no timeline. It is also normal not to experience anticipatory grief. Some people experience it intensely, other people don't experience it much at all. It can interfere with our work, our sleep, socialization, even tasks of daily living. And we navigate those feelings better when we can share them with people who can provide support over time.